Welcome into Community Forum. It's an opportunity for you to talk to community leaders and talk about all kinds of different topics and events happening in our area. And today's guests are regular guests here on Community Forum. It's Chuck and Dee Dee Bresnow of Healing of the Heart Ministries. It's a ministry of reconciliation. Chuck and Dee Dee, good morning and welcome to Community Forum.
Good morning, Greg.
Good morning, Greg.
Good morning, listeners.
So good. Yes, so good to have you here with us again today. And our topic today is New Year and New You. And, we've sort of gotten a little distance away from January 1st. Somebody said around Christmas time, somebody asked, what are New Year's resolutions? And the other person said, well, basically, it's a to-do list for the first week of January. But actually, we're looking for changes that are a little more long-term. So, Chuck and Dee Dee, how can individuals, couples, and families use the freshness of January in a new year to think about making changes?
Oh, praise the Lord. This is a good time of reflection and asking the Lord some questions and believing that change is possible, not giving up when we want to give up. But, where does God want me to go this year? What does He want me to speak to? What does He want for me this year? I need to spend some time in reflection and ask Him the changes that I need to make and the things that would please Him, what He would like. Maybe He's been telling me something for years and I've never obeyed it. So maybe it's time to obey something that God has told you a long time ago or told us a long time ago. And these things that we're going to share today are things that God has worked in our lives and God is working in our lives. So it's not something that we don't, it's just, we're sharing things that we've learned over the years and that we are still learning.
That's wonderful. Now, what are some issues that persist from year to year, like baggage? So many people have this in their own lives and their relationships as well.
Well, we know that when we work with a couple, there's some common threads to things. One of the things that people quite often say is a lack of communication. Now, we personally don't think there's a lack of communication. We know we've listened to couples, and they may do a lot of talking back and forth, but maybe the lack of communication is the idea of, am I listening or not listening to what the person's saying, or am I really telling them what's really going on inside? Can I do that? And if that's not being communicated, then we definitely know there's a problem. But then the other flip side would be, okay, maybe they're good communicators, but they still have difficulties because there's still some issues in the background. Like you said, maybe there's some bitterness or anger going on, and it's never been resolved. We like to use the word we're going to take things to resolution, not we're going to, and it sort of ties in with the idea of a New Year's resolution, but we want to take things to actually resolve them or come to a conclusion that benefits both people in a marriage.
Mm-hmm. Perhaps, I need to forgive someone this year. Or I need to ask forgiveness of someone this year. Maybe I have attitudes that need adjustment. In 1 Corinthians 11:28, it tells us to examine ourselves, to see, where am I at? Most people don't, we don't really enjoy doing that in our flesh, do we? But we know that God has good for us, and He will bring good out of it as we listen to Him. As far as, marriage goes, maybe I need to genuinely repent and turn from my sin. Evaluate, what am I living for? Am I living for money? Am I living for only for my job? Am I living for, relationships that God has put in my life? We need to think about these things. Are the ways I'm spending my time pleasing to God? Do I need to try to reconcile with someone this year? Ask God, how can I love my spouse better this year? Ask Jesus, He'll show you. Then take these steps and do these things. Ask your spouse, what would make you feel loved by me? And then do it and say it. We have to get to the point where where we're surrendering all to the Lord, and we can start to experience the good that He has for us.
Mm.
Am I too busy to take time to show love to my spouse or my children? What can I change to make that happen? I think we have to think more than in generalization. Sometimes when people make New Year's resolutions, I don't even like to call them that. I have a list of goals and places things I would like to see happen in the new year for both healing of the heart and for us personally. And then I know that maybe I write too many things down and they're all not going to get done. But I don't have to fret over that or condemn myself, but I can make progress. And I think sometimes when you see it written down and you refer to it periodically, it helps you stay on track as far as making it happen. Also, perhaps making a list of, okay, if we speak in a generalization, that's not going to help us step by step get there. So we need to think about the steps that need to happen. Even begin the habit of eating dinner together as a family. Many families never eat dinner together. Maybe I need to listen more and talk less. Maybe I need to listen to the cautions of my wife or husband. Maybe there's some wisdom there that I need to listen to. How can I impart spiritual truth to my children and or grandchildren this year? How could I make that happen? We've been thinking about that lately. Put limits on phone usage, social media, news, watching any screen, put limits on it. Ask God what He would like you to do instead. Get help for addictions and stick with it no matter what. And those are just some ideas.
No, that's great. We're talking about a new year, new you with Chuck and Dee Dee Bresnow. And you both touched on this, but let's focus for a few minutes on married couples. What areas can they change and how can they improve them? And again, Dee Dee, you just mentioned this drawing closer to the Lord. And if you see that as kind of a triangle, as we go up the triangle, we get closer to each other. So how can we do that in practical terms?
Well, I think we have to clear up any walls that have grown up over the years in our marriage, because those things will prevent you from experiencing the oneness that God desires for you. So when I talked about addressing our spiritual emotional issues, which we're going to be having an event soon at Calvary Bible, Love Marriage for Life, which is going to be a good introduction to helping people in these ways. Did you have something to say?
Well, I wanted to say that too often, and I don't know if it's because I'm a guy and I like to fix things all the time, but I'm always like, where's the answer? Where's the answer? Where's the answer? And I might get stuck on the answer. In other words, if there's an issue there, I'm trying to find the answer or think that I have the answer, rather than just saying, okay, God, what's the answer to this problem, especially if it's been persisting for a while. And so I can't let myself just get constantly focused on trying to find the answer to the problem, and so it brings resolution, thinking, oh, okay, now I can find a quick answer to this and it'll be resolved, and then I can move on to something else, rather than saying, okay, I've got a problem here. God, what is the answer to this problem? And it might take a while. He might show me many different aspects of the problem that I never even thought of to help me resolve the problem. And so, and then that process, if I am willing to go through that, then I'm probably going to be able to draw closer to my spouse. If she sees that I'm being more attentive and not just try to find the answer. Oh, here's the answer. But I'm going to say, okay, what do you think the answer is? If I ask her, what do you think the answer is? And how can we work together to resolve this?
That's a good point.
Yeah, that's great. And for the sake of time, I'm going to keep mushing along because we could, you're doing a conference on it. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But for parents, you guys are parents and grandparents. We're going to talk about grandparenting in a moment. But some of our listeners have kids at home. Some are in middle school. Some are like mine. They're grown and gone. But how can parents, are there areas, small areas, large areas, where we can work to improve our relationships with our children or to coach kids to be all that they can be? What can we do?
Okay, this is an area that I think people experience probably throughout their life with their adult children and grandchildren. We have an opportunity, depending on what has happened during their childhood. Our own children might have issues, and I'm not saying that it's all the parents' fault, because children make choices too, right? But they could be affected in ways we have no idea. And I think we have to stay humble. I think we have to ask forgiveness of our children when we've hurt them deeply. When we discover that, they might be so close to us, they might not want to talk about it. But I think it's a long-term thing. It's a lifelong thing of, if that relationship has been damaged or it isn't very open, to making our children feel safe with us, so that they will be open to share with us from wherever they are and whatever they're doing. Our grandchildren, we feel in the last couple of years, few years, well, all the time, but especially God's been highlighting in that in our lives, of our grandchildren's spiritual well-being, and how we want to impart that to our grandchildren. How best can we do that? So, it may take years, but don't give up. It's not the end of the story. Keep praying and keep believing that change is possible. And let God comfort you. Tell him your pain. Many parents are carrying lots of pain. And, pray and tell God your struggle, and ask him to speak to you. Speak peace, and speak, David opened his heart to the Lord all the time and said, God, this is what's happening. And God would comfort him. And, maybe that's all we're going to have for a while.
Yeah.
But we need to not give up. It's another thing where we need to not give up and keep praying, keep believing that God can do the impossible.
Yeah, Chuck, I'm going to come to you in just a minute with the same question, but one of the things that I was talking with Ed the other day about is the fact that, David was anointed king, and then for years he's on the run, and he, says in Psalms that he wrote, the songs that he wrote, Lord, what's going on? I'm supposed to be king, and the king is trying to kill me, and I'm in this cave, just scraping by. So, Chuck, can you give a guy's perspective on this as far as parenting and grandparenting?
Well, if I look at it I look at Dad's perspective, I know that one of the things a large issue that we see, and that I've seen in my own life, is the idea that I have to affirm my children, both sons and daughters. That's a huge thing that we see lacking in a lot of people that come to see us. That's lacking in their lives. We might say, "Oh, did your father or your mother love you?" "Oh, yes, they did." "Well, how did you know that?" "Well, they took care of me." "Okay. Did they ever hurt you?" "Well, yeah." What was that like?" "Well, my dad never came to my basketball games, never paid any attention to me, he just, I was there, but he never even knew I existed. Now, we were actually starting to deal with second and third generations, which is kind of fun, and we know that maybe the father said, "No, I was there," or "I wanted to be there," but maybe for some reason it couldn't or didn't happen. But that needs to be communicated, between the parent and the child, and even if they're adult children, that I wanted to be there, I couldn't be there, but I still loved you, and I think you're doing a great job. And even if they're older, you can still tell them you're doing a good job. We may not agree with everything they do, but it's still important to be able to do that. As far as a large area in somebody's life, and to try and improve those relationships. And the other thing is to set an example, especially in a marriage, where if the parents are loving each other, just as an example, they don't have to be perfect parents, but if they're really trying to love each other, if the kids can see that the parents love each other, they're going to feel a whole lot better about maybe loving somebody and how to love a person when they get older. And it's going to be a win-win situation for the parents and the grandparents.
Oh, that's awesome. Chuck and Dee Dee Bresno, my guests from Healing of the Heart Ministries. Our topic, New Year and New You on Community Forum here on WMPC Radio. Now, what would you say to a Christian? Okay, we want to talk specifically about Christians for this question, although what you guys teach is universally true, but I appreciate the fact that you always use that as a cornerstone, that you got to get that relationship right first. But what would you say to a Christian who says, everything's fine, I don't see anything that needs to change, I basically like myself, I like the world, I like my life, without, trying to spoil the parade, so to speak, how would you counsel them?
Well, it's very difficult when someone doesn't want help and they don't think they need help. We can try to make the ground fertile for that, but I would say you have to pray for them, and realize this in our lives, this is not being a disciple. If we think we have it all together, and we're seeing this more and more in our culture, like there's nothing wrong with me, everything is someone else's fault. And I'm, practically perfect in every way, But that's not being a disciple. Being a disciple is I'm a learner. I want to grow. I want to be better than I was yesterday. I want to please the Lord. I want to go His direction. I want to be sanctified, which is a lifelong journey. I know that I need help, but I would pray for that person, and we do.
And I was thinking the idea that I'm not going to argue with them because that's not really going to get anywhere, but I might ask them a question as far as, if I have a situation in my life, how would you handle that? In other words, if I have a problem in my own life, I might ask them, well, if you had a problem with this, how would you take care of that situation? And just see what they might say. And maybe they would start to realize that that everything's not so perfect in their life, or that they really do need help in an area by maybe my asking that question, well, how did you handle it? So in other words, I'm not trying to say, oh, you're blind or something like that. I'm just saying, well, how did you handle this? Because I need help with a similar situation in my own life, to try and get some dialogue going.
Yeah, that's terrific, and I'm glad that you brought that out, because really that's just it. Mentioning, we talk about it as a metaphor, and for many of us it's a cliche. The Christian walk, well, that's a metaphor, right? We don't literally walk with the Lord, but it's something that the Bible talks about, Old and New Testament. And I think, what do you think about this? I think, especially from what I've learned from you for the last 20 minutes or so, is that it's a process. It's not something that magically happens overnight, but in terms of, improving our marriages, improving our family relationships, and, of course, improving our relationship with the Lord, it's a process. And I think a lot of us have to be patient with ourselves. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Well, I would. I mean, I know. But I don't know, Greg. Sometimes, like the minute I saw Dee Dee, I just knew she was the one for me.
There you go. That's the right thing to say on live radio. Points for you.
Oh, you're funny. Oh, my goodness. I'm still thinking about this idea of this person that doesn't want help. I would encourage them to ask Jesus what He thinks, and let God show them, and He will. Because when I pray, God, show me my sin because I want to repent, oh boy, He shows me something almost immediately. I think, yes, it is a step-by-step. Maybe we could pick one or two things. Talking about affirmation again, maybe we grew up with nobody ever affirming us, like my husband and I pretty much did. And so that was something that was foreign to us. And for me, it was easier to do with my children. But getting those words out, maybe things will feel uncomfortable at first. But we need to step out of our comfort zone and obey for what they do. Maybe I should step out of my comfort zone and write a letter or call someone just to care about them. Maybe these are things I've never done in my life. Learn one new thing this year. Maybe I could learn one new thing. And remember that impactful things can be done in small increments of time. Even in 15 minutes, big changes can be made over time. So don't be discouraged. Have courage and determine that this is the year I'm going to have courage and face my issues, face myself, and I'm going to stop running from my spiritual and emotional problems. I'm going to get help and not give up. I'm going to obey one thing that God has told me. Maybe he's just telling us to be friendly, and stop complaining. I saw a Facebook post that said, maturity is when you stop complaining and making excuses and start making changes.
There you go.
So
that's great.
I thought that was pretty profound,
Yeah.
So.
That's great, yeah. And as we wrap up this part, I want to give you plenty of time to talk about your event that's coming up at Calvary Bible. But in general, why is it, and maybe we don't like the idea of resolutions. I like picking a word theme for the year or for a period of time. But it's still a good time to turn the page. And like you said, to maybe focus on one thing or some small baby steps that we can make. Why is this still a good time of year to do that?
Well, why is it a good time of year? Well, I think just from a physical standpoint, maybe some people are a little bit less active outside, and there's less activities going on in the middle of the wintertime. When, we're kind of like snowed in, although we haven't been snowed in that much this year. But there's just maybe a good time to be able to do that because we're a little bit maybe less busy with all the things going on that we would normally have going on at other times of the years. And so I can make that a time to be able to sit there and think about things and meditate on things and think and really try and look for some answers during this time period. Physically, I think that's one of the things.
Oh.
And one of the things I just wanted to mention is I wouldn't necessarily try and take on some really big issue and then say, I got to solve this big issue, which we maybe need to solve. But I would try and make small steps so I could see myself progressing towards the end, like having small victories and little battles along the way to give me encouragement that we can resolve this bigger one that's out there that I'm working on. Sort of like, if I was cutting a tree down, I didn't just cut it down all at once. I cut it down. Maybe I cut some of the branches out first and then started working on the trunk later on, so I don't, get too killed in the process by
right.
cutting the whole tree down all at once, which
right.
I'm not real good at doing.
Yeah, that's great. That's right. Baby steps, little victories. That's so important. I agree. Now, again, you mentioned it earlier, a marriage conference that's coming up next week. So tell us about that.
So that's the Love Marriage for Life event. That's going to be a Friday night with a catered dinner at Calvary Bible, and then a session, and then 2 sessions on Saturday. It's going to have a little bit of a Valentine theme, of course, because it's just before Valentine's Day, but it's really going to give some people some food, and we're, not just in the natural, which that will be there, but also in the spiritual and emotional, and to really help these couples become one, which is what God desires for them.
We'll both be there. Diane, Dee and I will both be there, so you can ask us questions. There'll be a time for that and a way to be able to communicate questions if you have something pressing that you want to try and get an answer on, as well as we're going to have live testimonies there. 3 couples are going to give the testimony that we've helped in the past. So, and we're pretty excited about this Friday night and Saturday morning event.
Oh, that's really
Calvary
great.
Bible.
Yeah, and you're asking folks to register by this Sunday, right, or Monday morning at the latest, right?
I believe that's what the church has going there, and there's lots of advertisement on Facebook, and or you can call the church.
Yep. And there will be babysitting for younger kids and activities for kids up to 11 years old.
Yes, free babysitting. thing.
That's right. That is terrific. Well, after we wrap up here, I'm going to give everybody all the details about this, but thank you so much for your time. As always, it is time well spent, and I know not only with your appearing here, but with the work that you're doing, that you are changing lives in the name of the Lord, doing the Lord's work, and I really appreciate your taking the time to join us today. So God bless, and I hope a lot of folks can get out there next week and join you in person at your marriage conference. Really appreciate it. Thanks, folks.
You're welcome. All right. Have a great day.
Bye, everybody.